We'll begin this morsel by addressing some of the common terminology that you might come across when discussing networks in an HPC environment. The OSI model stands for the Open Systems Interconnection Model, and it's a conceptual model that is created by the International Organization for Standardization, and it enables diverse communication systems to communicate using standard protocols. In plain English, the OSI provides a standard for different computer systems to be able to communicate with each other. The model can be seen as a universal language for computer networking. It's based on the concept of splitting up a communication system into 7 abstract layers, each one stacked upon the last. In this introduction chapter on networking, we will focus our attention on the OSI layers 3 and 4, that is, the network layer and the transport layer, relating to TCP and IP. You will hear mention of the terms unicast, multicast, and broadcast. The word unicast can be broken down into its 2 component parts. That is uni, meaning one, and cast, which in literary meaning is to throw in some direction. So in other words, we're throwing something in one direction. Here is a source sending to a target, one-to-one. By the same logic, multicast would mean throwing something in multiple directions, that is, one-to-many. So in this pool of recipients, you can see that 3 of them have been targeted from a source. And finally, broadcast means throwing something in all directions, that is, a one-to-all, as opposed to multicast, which is a one-to-many. There is a selection in multicast, but there is no discrimination in a broadcast. With an HPC system, you will run both WAN and LAN scope. A LAN, abbreviated for Local Area Network, is a network that covers a small geographical area such as a home, an office, or a group of buildings. A WAN, which is an abbreviation for Wide Area Network, is a network that covers a larger geographical area which can typically span the entire globe. An example of a widely used WAN is the Internet. A typical example of a LAN would be perhaps your computer lab network, whereas your university might span multiple campuses with some distance between them, which might connect to one another through a WAN. So in this diagram, you could think of one computer lab and one campus here running on a LAN, and another computer lab and another campus here running on a LAN, and those 2 campuses are linked through a WAN. Very likely, you'll hear the terms latency and throughput being mentioned quite often in terms of high-performance computing, particularly because they both relate to the performance of a network.
These 2 terms are often confused with one another, and both are vitally important considerations in an HPC system. Let's imagine a water pipe. Here's a nozzle over here, and there's a block which is controlled by a tap. We can see all the water is filled in over here. The pipe's water flow is controlled by this tap. When you first open an empty pipe, the amount of time it takes for water to flow to the end of the pipe is called the latency. Whereas the total amount of water that can flow through this pipe at any moment is referred to as the throughput. So, simply put, latency is how long it takes for one bit of data to travel across a network to its endpoint. This is typically measured in milliseconds, whereas throughput measures how much data can be sent per unit of time across the network. And this is typically measured in megabits per second or gigabits per second.
And you can think of it using the keyword late. How late after opening the tap will the first drop arrive? In data terms, the latency would reflect how late the bit or byte of data is that was transmitted after the communication first initiated. Throughput, on the other hand, reflects how much water is flowing through the pipe at any moment of time. Whereas latency measures how long it takes for the first drop to reach the end of the pipe, throughput measures how much water is flowing through the pipe over time. So in computer data terms, that would be how much data is flowing over the connection per unit of time. You'll also come across the terms HBA, which stands for Host Bus Adapter, which is related to an InfiniBand type of connection, which we'll talk about later, and a NIC, which is an abbreviation for a Network Interface Controller, which is related to Ethernet devices.